Ethical tourism is absolutely paramount. Ultimately, we have been destroying our world for centuries, and the pace at which this has happened has increased exponentially in recent years. We simply cannot continue to act in the way that we have been. Yes, people are recycling more. Yes, we do have more environmentally friendly modes of transport. Governments are funding the build of solar and wind power plants as an alternative to coal. Biofuels are being developed to use in aircraft. Children are taught to be global citizens at school. All of this is wonderful, but it's not enough. There are many ways that we can be ethical tourists. But whilst you might see a lot of lists floating around telling you what to do and what not to do, actually, ethical tourism isn't as simple as you might think, and it has got a level of complexity to it. And that's what I'm going to teach you about today in this video. If you are new here, my name is Dr. Hayley-Stainton, and I'm here to teach you all about the travel and tourism industry and how to be a good, sustainable, ethical tourist. Ethical tourism is a concept that has been developed in response to the critiques of mass tourism and over-tourism. Essentially, ethical tourism encourages people to stay away from the 4 S's. That's sun, sea, sand, and sex. And ethical tourism encourages us to exchange those for the 3 D's. That's travelling, trekking, and trucking. To put it simply, ethical tourism is a form of responsible tourism, and it is based on the premise of sustainability. And sustainable tourism is based on 3 pillars: the economy, the environment, and society. So in order to be an ethical tourist, we need to consider all 3 of those things and act responsibly whilst we travel. Ethical tourism is not a new concept, but it is one that has become increasingly recognised in recent years. Over the past 30 years or so, ethical tourism has become an important discussion point for academics, businesses, governments, and the general public. It's scary to think that when our parents travelled in their youth, there was little regard for ethics. In fact, holidays were seen as a time to let loose and be carefree. Turning off the lights when you left a room was often the last thing on a tourist's mind. Fast forward a generation, and the picture is really quite different. The emergence and the growth of the ethical consumer has been apparent since the 1990s. In response, companies have begun to realise the importance of social responsibility, and they have begun to implement ethical practices into their business models. Sadly, this often means that actually the company's motives are not ethical, they are profit-driven, but nonetheless, ethical behaviours are adopted, and that's a good thing. There are many ethical issues within tourism. I mean, the travel and tourism industry is the biggest industry in the world, so it's bound to have its problems. One of the major issues in terms of ethical tourism is the distribution of income. The travel and tourism industry makes a lot of money. However, this money is not distributed evenly. More often than not, the vast majority of wealth made from the tourism industry goes to large Western corporations. Even if we concentrate on an area of tourism that is in the developing world, much of the income from tourism is still swallowed up by international organisations. This is known as economic leakage. Inherently, most of the jobs in the travel and tourism industry pay low salaries. Think the chef in your hotel restaurant, the maid who cleans your beds, and the theme park operator at the fun fair. None of these people are likely to earn very much. Tourism can also cause other negative economic impacts, such as gentrification, which is when the local people are pushed out of the area that they have traditionally lived in because the cost of living has risen too much for them to afford to stay. The travel and tourism industry can also have many ethical implications when it comes to access to services and facilities. The tourism industry is known to use and abuse local areas and resources. This is often at the detriment of the local population. Take golf, for example. Golf requires a huge amount of water in order to be maintained. In some parts of the world where there are water shortages, this means that local people may go without the essential water that they need for cooking, washing, etc., all at the expense of the tourism industry. The travel and tourism industry, unfortunately, is also known to be a catalyst for the exploitation of children. Sadly, children are exploited within the tourism industry more often than we care to admit. Have you ever bought an item from a child who is selling things on the street? If the answer is yes, then you are helping to fuel this exploitation. If the parents know that their kids can make money from tourism, they will continue to keep them out of school and working on the streets. There are many jobs that kids do that are indirectly linked to the tourism industry too, from working in factories, to farm work, to begging, to sex tourism. Obviously, none of this is good for the child, nor the surrounding community. Similarly, the travel and tourism industry can also cause the exploitation of women. There are many women who are exploited within the tourism industry. The most obvious example of this is through sex tourism. This is particularly prominent in Southeast Asia, amongst other parts of the world. However, this isn't the only way that women are exploited within the travel and tourism industry. Most of the top jobs are done by men. Typically, women are paid less, even if they are doing the same job. And many women just are not given the same opportunities that men are. The sex tourism industry is pretty significant. Many people like to pretend it doesn't exist, but the truth is that sex tourism is a multi-million-dollar industry. It's incredibly sad that many people who work in the sex trade do not want to be there. Some people are forced into this line of work against their will, and some people just feel that they have no other option. Some of these people are only children. Sadly, animals also often suffer at the hands of the tourism industry. If we are to be ethical tourists, we need to take animal welfare seriously. Wildlife tourism has moved towards the forefront of consumer awareness in recent years. People are now largely empathetic of animal rights and welfare, which is a good thing. Nowadays, people are preferring to visit safari parks over zoos. They are preferring to go to animal sanctuaries and conservation products and do volunteer work, rather than to do things like riding elephants or hugging tigers, the likes of which have received a lot of negative publicity in recent years, and rightly so. Nonetheless, the maltreatment of animals does sadly continue to happen in many contexts around the world. Is it ethical to ride a dolphin? Is it ethical to pat a cat who wants to be left alone in a cat cafe? Is it ethical to ride an elephant? In most cases, probably not. One of the most well-known ethical issues associated with the travel and tourism industry is environmental destruction. It's ironic, really, that tourism all too often destroys the environment that it relies on. We go to visit a beautiful beach, yet we leave behind litter at the end of the day, making it not so beautiful anymore. For tourism to be ethical, stakeholders need to ensure that any damage to the environment is minimized. This includes a wide range of things, such as reducing our CO2 emissions, picking up litter, and reducing the amount of plastic that we use, to name just a few examples. And there are many cultural impacts of tourism too. There are many different ways that tourism can adversely affect culture. It can take away the authenticity of an area, of a culture. It causes globalization. We are all becoming more the same than we ever have before. Some people are no longer wearing their traditional clothes or speaking their traditional language. Many tourists are not mindful of local cultures. They're not mindful of religions, and they're not mindful of customs. And as a result, they offend the local population. An ethical tourist would not walk around topless in a Muslim country, for example. However, if that tourist doesn't know about the local culture and the rights and wrongs associated with that, then they may unintentionally demonstrate unethical behaviour. Ethical tourism is somewhat subjective. Some people say that at the heart of it, tourists are selfish. We're going on holiday to please ourselves, to do something we like. Other people will argue that absolutely tourism can be ethical. We can go above and beyond to actually help a local community and to do good things. There are so many ways that we can exhibit ethical behaviour when we are tourists, and it's super important that we do. So here are a few ways that you can be an ethical tourist when you travel. Be kind to the environment. If you want to be an ethical tourist, you must demonstrate a commitment to reducing any negative impacts on the environment. Some things that you can do include not buying animal souvenirs, not touching animals, not feeding wild animals, avoiding unethical wildlife tourism, not dropping litter, not touching coral. Slow tourism can be a great alternative that is more eco-friendly. Opt for eco-friendly transport if you can. Turn off the lights. Give ecotourism a try. Reduce your use of plastic. Recycle. Don't waste water. And stick to the main paths. An ethical tourist should always be kind to society. They should have care and consideration for the people and the communities that they interact with as part of their tourist experience. Here are some things that you can do to make sure that you are ethical when it comes to society. Learn the local language. Be respectful of local customs and traditions. Immerse yourself into local life. Be sensitive. Don't give to beggars, as hard as that might be. Treat people fairly. Avoid sex tourism. Don't take photos of people without their permission. And last but not least, an ethical tourist should be kind to the economy. Tourists should be mindful of their economic behaviour. And here are some things that you can do. Shop local. Avoid multinational chain hotels. And limit your economic leakage where you can. Avoid all-inclusive holidays for that reason. Leave positive reviews for local businesses. Consider who you are booking your holiday with and try to book local. And haggle fairly. Ethical tourism is a fascinating subject and it's super interesting to look at. But more than that, it's so important. We need to take care of this beautiful world that we live in. And the best way to do that is to be ethical. If you have liked this video, please do give me a big thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to my page and watch this one next.